Welcome into Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Christina Evans. Let's go ahead and get to that story that I teased just ahead of the break. I want to show you a live look that we have there in New York City. Of course, we're talking about the Daniel Penny trial. A judge has now granted a motion from Manhattan prosecutors to dismiss the more serious charge of second-degree manslaughter against Daniel Penny. This is in his trial over the chokehold death of Jordan Neely on a New York City subway last year. We do want to check in with our partners there in New York, Fox 5, to get the very latest on this story.
Trial deadlocked on whether Penny was guilty of manslaughter. They sent the judge 2 notes on Friday asking him to further clarify the charges, saying they could not reach a unanimous decision on the top count. The judge sent them back to the jury room on an Allen charge, giving them instructions to try and reach a verdict. But after trying again, they still couldn't agree.
It seemed that they had a difficult time with the concept of justification. That's whether Daniel Penny was justified in doing what he did under the circumstances, and whether it was criminal or not.
The decision from the judge now allows the jury to deliberate the lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide. However, jurors had previously been instructed that they needed to reach a verdict on the top charge before they could consider the second charge.
And this is the right step. You don't just say, you know, we can't reach a verdict, we're going to be done here. You give that jury many chances. That's why you have that Allen charge. And ultimately, it's a DA's prerogative to charge lesser crimes initially or higher and more serious crimes. Here they went with 2 different offenses, and they had that right to pull it back. But in terms of the law, the judge followed the law.
The jurors have been deliberating since Tuesday on whether to convict Penny in the death of Jordan Neely. Penny, a former Marine, placed Neely in a chokehold for about 6 minutes after Neely got on the subway acting erratically and threatening passengers.
I think the fact that the jury was deadlocked on manslaughter is indicative of how this case has played out, not only in court, but also in the court of public opinion. It's really divided the city. And the way that they were deadlocked on that manslaughter charge is indicative that the jury was also divided.
Penny's attorney objecting to the prosecution's move to dismiss the manslaughter count, arguing this would lead to a compromise verdict. However, former prosecutors say it was a strategic move from the prosecution.
By removing the manslaughter and leaving the criminally negligent homicide, they can still hang that proverbial hat on a conviction, and justice, in their view, can still be served.
Our thanks to Fox 5 New York's Jessica Formoso for that story, just giving us a wrap of sort of what happened there in court today. Taking another live look there in New York, we do want to continue. Of course, we know this ruling clears the way for the jury to consider the remaining lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide. This came after that Manhattan jury said they were deadlocked twice on the manslaughter charge, and Penny's defense attorneys renewed their motion for a mistrial. So now I want to bring into the conversation, of course, attorney Neama Rahmani. Neama, thanks so much for joining us here on Live Now this evening to talk about this case in New York. It's captured audiences all over our nation just because of the nature of the things that are being played out in that courtroom. But I first have to ask you, we do know, again, that the jury's been deadlocked. Is this a common occurrence for this sort of thing, what we saw play out in court today?
Christina, it's not all that common, but this isn't an ordinary case. And like some of the colleagues who spoke, Imran and Ansari, I mean, this case involves race, it involves homelessness, it involves our subway system, public transportation, mental health issues, use of force. We have a defendant who's a former Marine, a veteran. So jurors are ordinary people, and they bring in their life experiences into that courtroom. And there are people who feel very strongly about this issue. Obviously, the whole entire world is talking about this case. Donald Trump has been active on social media addressing this case as well. So I'm not surprised that 12 men and women are unable to come to a decision in a case like this.
And Neama, when we're looking at these charges, of course, we knew that if he was going to get convicted of manslaughter, he could spend up to 15 years behind bars, I should say around 15 years behind bars. With this new charge, again, the lesser charge that they're now focusing on, criminally negligent homicide, what happens there? What does that look like for him?
Well, that is a potential 4-year sentence. And this is really important because folks are talking about these lesser included. And in homicide cases, this is actually not uncommon. When prosecutors, especially, they don't have a particularly strong case, they think maybe they can't get a guilty verdict on the top count, they'll plead it in the alternative. So an easy example is you might have your first-degree murder, right? that's premeditated, that has intent. Then you go down to second-degree murder, felony murder. So then you have involuntary manslaughter, which is a fit of rage. Now, obviously, those types of murders require intent. Here, you don't have that intent to kill, but you can have involuntary manslaughter, which is criminally reckless. And that's different from negligent homicide, which requires simple negligence. And the analogy I like to give is, let's say you're driving and you're not paying attention, your phone rings, you're running a red light, you kill someone. Well, that's negligent homicide, right? But if you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, you're racing, something like that, well, that's criminally reckless and that's manslaughter. So the jury's going to have to sort through this. And obviously, Penny being the mistrial being declared as to the top count is certainly a win for him. But there may be a little bit of a problem here, and this is why. The defense argued self-defense. And self-defense, if the jury bought it, is really an absolute defense here. And this is why this is important. The jury thought that unanimously that Penny was justified to use deadly force, then he gets acquitted of everything. Or if the jury bought the defense's argument that Neely died not because of the chokehold, but because of a health issue, the sickle cell disease, the synthetic marijuana, then that would be a problem as well. So the fact that the jury didn't acquit outright leads me to believe that at least there's some jurors here who don't believe that this was pure self-defense, or at least they didn't understand the instructions, Christina.
I'm glad you mentioned that because my next question was going to be, is there a chance that this could go to a mistrial, or can this jury come to a decision? What do you think the odds are in this case?
I think the odds are very likely that this is a mistrial. And this is one of those areas where you got to understand the differences between different state laws. So, in California, where I practice, the jury can decide all these lesser includeds at once. They can address involuntary manslaughter, criminal negligence, and then if that's a no, they can go and decide, well, is there simple negligence? But in New York, they really have to go step by step. Now, if they convicted the top count, the lesser counts don't matter. They merge together. That's a legal doctrine called merger. But if they don't return a verdict on the top count, whether it's a not guilty or whether they hang and it's a mistrial, then they move to the second count. But it's really kind of a step-by-step process in New York. Now, the jury can certainly return a verdict on Monday on simple negligent homicide. But really, the only difference there is that intent, right? That criminal negligence, the recklessness versus the simple negligence. And I don't know if there's that much of a distinction here where you have some jurors saying, well, yeah, this was negligent, simple negligence, but it wasn't criminally negligent. To get 12 out of 12 in a case like this, I would be surprised if we get a verdict. I really think we're heading for a mistrial here in a hung jury.
And Neama, before I let you go, I have to ask you about the civil side of this case. We do know that the father of Jordan Neely did file a lawsuit on Wednesday against Daniel Penny. Will any of this that's happening there in criminal court affect what could happen later on in civil court?
It absolutely can. And this is why I'm really surprised that Neely's father filed that lawsuit while the criminal case is pending, because we're really at the end. And, sometimes it allows the argument that, look, this isn't about criminal justice. This is about money. And it can potentially affect the criminal case. I don't like that maneuver. But if Penny is convicted, even of simple negligence, the standard, the burden of proof in a civil case, it's preponderance of the evidence, so it's a lower standard. It's not preponderant. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. But importantly, if there is a criminal conviction, that is dispositive evidence of negligence in the civil case. So if Neely is convicted, even of simple negligence, even if he doesn't do any time, that means he's liable in the civil case. So that's already established. So it just becomes a question of damages in that wrongful death case. How much was the loss of Neely's life to his father and the other family members who are left behind? So it can absolutely have an effect in the civil case if indeed Penny is convicted. Now, Penny is acquitted, or if it's a hung jury, Neely's family still gets a shot in the civil case. Again, different standard. Just like OJ was acquitted in the criminal case, but found liable in the civil wrongful death lawsuit filed by the Goldmans. So still they have a chance. But again, usually the typical way to do this is just to wait until the criminal case is over.
Certainly some interesting details that came out of court today. And when you were just saying OJ and talking about the difference between civil and criminal, that was my first thought as well. So we appreciate you for being on this show. Of course, attorney Neama Rahmani here to break down the very latest out of New York with the Daniel Penny trial. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Christina. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. All right.